Hello, everyone. Gabby here,
And I'm Brenna.
and welcome back to the Mystery of Everything podcast.
Not woohoo.
No, actually today's episode, trigger warning, it can be very disturbing. It involves murder, incest, murder of a child. So if that's not your cup of tea, go watch one of her episodes.
Mine'll be
Unless it's one of her depressing episodes, in which case go find a fun one. We have less depressing
some fun
episodes.
ones, some weird ones about dolphin.
So today we're going to be talking about the Hinterkaifeck Murders. And in March of 1922, in a remote part of the Bavarian countryside, 6 people were killed in a horrific nightmare. I mean, it was a horrific nightmare scenario that is still talked about today. So this story is so gruesome and chilling that it sticks to the minds of people over a century later. The victims of this horrific crime were a family and their new maid who unfortunately showed up hours before the gruesome killings.
Aww.
They were the patriarch of the family, Andreas Gruber, age 63, his wife, Casilia, age 72, their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabrielle, age 35, Victoria's young children, Casilia, age 7, and Joseph, aged 2. The last victim was not related to the family, but she had only arrived a few hours earlier, and this was Maria Baumgartner, age 44.
That's so sad. I mean, obviously all of it's sad, but just the fact, I don't know anything. Let me preference this. I know nothing about this case whatsoever. Gab has not. Well, she did tell me some.
I told her something because I was really bothered.
I feel like she just had to get a little bit of it out so she'd be able to sleep. I was like, why would you tell me that? Well, I mean, I'm going to learn it today anyways. But it's extra sad. I mean, it's sad regardless, but it's extra sad that she showed up a few days before it.
It was also really sad because her sister is the one who dropped her off, and she had a really hard life because she had a disability. She had mobility issues, and her whole life was just working and jobs not working out. So she was passed back and forth, and she actually found this job through an agency, and then that was the outcome. So
Also, it is thunderstorming where we're at, and this is made of metal
and plastic.
So if you see me every time it's lightning, I'm like peeking back over my shoulder. That is why I'm peeking back over my shoulder.
We're gonna be so fine, and if we're not, we got it all on camera. So jump in.
Steven, make a bunch of money off of. Wait, I can't say that because this is a sad episode. Make a bunch of money off mine and Gabby's. I can't say that either. Cut that out. So we could leave that on Patreon because they get us.
Steven, you didn't take out my insurance policy, my life insurance policy, so you're lost, bucko. Okay.
Does it say it's death by thunderstorm? Is that included?
I think it should be because it's like a act of God, right? That is included in life insurance.
Well, you did volunteer to be in a metal dome.
I did. This was your idea.
Everything's fine. We're fine.
Okay. The family lived on the Hinterkaifeck farm, which was isolated from the nearby town, and they kept mostly to themselves. It was located about 43 miles north of Munich, and it was built around 1863. The farm was named Hinter, which means behind in German, and Kaifeck, which was the hamlet nearby. So they just named it behind behind Kaifeck, essentially.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the family avoided the neighbors, and the neighbors avoided the family. And this was due to a few factors. The head of the house was Andreas Gruber. He was born in Greinstetten and worked as a farm hand. He married Casilia in 1886, and he moved to Hinterkaifeck. She got it from her previous husband in a divorce settlement back in 1877. And according to some of the articles, Casilia was his boss.
You could get divorced in the 18...
In Germany.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, woman owning property.
Yeah. Germany was different, I guess, at this time. I don't know. But
I don't know.
He was her employee, allegedly, according to some of the articles. And he married her, and she inherited the farm, and they got together. So, love at first farm. So Casilia, she was born in 1849, and she had 3 children from her first marriage and then 2 children from her marriage to Andreas. These 2 children were Victoria and Sophie, and I actually have no information about Sophie, so for all we know, she just wasn't there. That's it. Their daughter Victoria, she was born in 1887, and she was one of the victims of this gruesome murder.
Mm.
She married Carl Gabriel in 1914, and they obtained ownership of the farm. So after their marriage, they transferred it to her. However, after World War One, Carl was sent away to fight after the start of it, and he died in the Battle of Arras in December of 1914, which was 1 month before his daughter was born.
Oh, that's awful.
And this daughter was named Casilia, and she was also a victim of the murder at just 7 years old. Now, the youngest son of Victoria was surrounded by some controversy, as Andreas Gruber and Victoria were both convicted of incest in Newburgh District Court. This relationship allegedly ran from 1907 to 1910. Andreas was sentenced to 1 year in prison, while Victoria served 1 month. However, years later, they were once again reported for an incestuous relationship by Lorenz Schlittenbauer because he alleged that her newborn son was Andreas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this didn't stick, and it may have only happened because there were doubts in Joseph's paternity, because
Was Victoria consensual with?
no. So when Schlittenbauer brought the case to court, he said that she opened up to him about,
What was
yeah.
going on? Okay.
But then this might have happened because he wanted to marry Victoria and they had an affair. But then he got hit, when it didn't work out, he got hit with child support.
Oh, yeah.
So it might have been that he didn't want to pay child support. So he was like, hey, this is an opportunity, because he must have known their past,
Yeah.
you know? But either way, he was deemed an unsuitable witness. He retracted a bunch of his statements in court, and the case was thrown out. And he did have to settle child support payments outside of court. So, yeah. But that child, Joseph Gruber, he was only 2.5 years old, and he became a victim of this murder as well. And that brings us to the maid. She arrived at Hinterkaifeck only that day, basically, because the murder happened later that night.
Mm.
And she was 45 years old. She had an intellectual disability and a really hard life, according to her sister. So just wrong place, wrong time. Very sad occurrence. But in the days leading up to that murder, there were many, many, many weird occurrences that were documented by not only the family, but by people they told in the surrounding villages. So these were all compiled in a list that I found on guyhadley.com. It's a true crime website. Check it out. I'll link it down below. But they listed all of the weird events in the order that they occurred. In late February 1922, Andreas Gruber, he discovered unfamiliar footprints in the snow leading from the forest to the farmhouse, but he didn't find footprints that led away from the house. So in theory, if someone was going to the farmhouse, they would have had to leave, especially if none of the family members entered that part of the house.
That's suspicious.
And they would have seen who they were, but they didn't see anyone come in. The tracks led from the forest to the farm's machine room, which some sources say it had a broken lock. Other sources say the lock was broken.
Yeah.
And it was found broken, but
well, I feel like all the
unclear.
people that would have known are dead.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. That's the problem with this case. And I think that's why it went unsolved for so long. And allegedly around this time, they also stated hearing footsteps and loud noises coming from the attic, especially at night. However, when they searched, they weren't able to find anything. But that happened for months. And later on, during the murder investigation, this is what's really creepy. Police found 2 depressions in the straw in the attic and a displaced roof tile, which gave anyone up there the vantage point of being able to see the entire farmyard. Yeah. So someone probably more than likely was
hanging out in their attic.
Yep. So the other thing is they saw someone standing at the edge of the woods looking at them. And then later on, they found a Munich newspaper on the property that no one in the house had purchased. They believe that the postman may have lost the paper, but no one in the family or in the surrounding area subscribed to it. Yeah.
That's super weird.
Yeah.
So someone was just hanging out in their attic reading the newspaper, passing the time?
Well, someone was at the edge of the woods. I don't know, like
passing
someone
the time
could have
with a
been
newspaper?
in and out of the house and they had no clue.
Normally, well, I don't know this case, but normally whenever people like hang out and linger in attics, I don't want to say they live, well, I mean, in some cases they live there, like they make themselves at home. which makes it so much worse.
There's a whole group of people that enjoy secretly living in other people's homes, which terrifies
Yeah.
me.
There's like TV shows about it. Well, it's the families documenting it. One of them was a murder too. It was sorry, not a tangent, a little bit of a side note, but a teenage boy liked a girl that lived there, and she like befriended him, being friendly, and then she rejected him, and she kept telling her mom like, my stuff's going missing, my stuff's being moved around, and her mom was like, oh no, it's fine, everything's fine. And then she saw the teenage boy there one day standing in a room, like he came out of hiding. He had been hiding, peeking at her for months, finally came out of hiding, showed himself. That her dad, she was like, Dad, come. They all hid in a bedroom with a gun, and she climbed out the bedroom window to the neighbors to go get help because the guy had a knife. Anyways, he ended up leaving that house, but then he went missing, and then a week later, their neighbors down the road were dead because he went and killed them. So I just think of how close. Being that teenage girl, that would be so terrifying.
That's,
And obviously, I mean, you kind of, obviously, it's not her fault, but you'd feel a little weird, because the boy had a crush on you. Neither here nor there.
Wow. I did look up a bunch of cases of that happening. There was one lady who did have someone living in her attic, and she called the cops multiple times, and they thought she was insane. They were like, there's nothing there. They didn't bother even looking, and then she got murdered by the person living in her attic. So that actually does happen. So
If
I have
I
3
even
attics.
have an inkling, I'm out.
I have 3 attics, and
Why are you telling people this?
because I have 2 big ass dogs and a bunch of guns. So I feel like it'll be okay.
If I even have an inkling, a peek, if I walk
You
by
burning the house down?
yeah, if I walk by one of my own paintings and I see the eyes move, I'm out.
So in addition to all of these weird happenings, the keys to the farmhouse also went missing, and they couldn't be found anywhere. Yeah, just a few days before. Then, with everything going on, they were significant enough to cause the family's previous maid, a woman by the name of Crescens Rieger, to quit her job because she believed that all of the incidents indicated that the house was haunted.
Yeah.
Which me too.
Could you imagine being her, though, and
hearing
quitting your
this?
job? Well, all this weird stuff's happening, you quit your job, and then you find out that this happened a little bit later, you'd be like...
So it was confirmed, though, that on March 31st, the father and daughter, they both went shopping in Schrobenhausen, and they told the locals all about all the weird events that were happening on the farm. The people that they told said, hey, you need to tell the cops. But they were like, no, it's, it is what it is. It's just weird happenings. They didn't make any reports to the police, and I think that was a major mistake.
Yeah.
But the day before the murders, the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, she was dropped off at the farm by her sister, who was the last person to see the entire family alive. After being dropped off, the family, unfortunately, were lured one by one to the barn, though. And that's the thing. No one knows why they were lured to the barn, what would cause them. Because people were like, okay, so someone made the animals make noises, and then they heard it from the house, so they all just went out one by one.
There weren't any signs of a fire or anything like that?
No. But then when they did investigate their investigation later on, you couldn't hear the animals from the house.
Were they killed one by one?
One by one. So they were lured one by one.
Or...
Nope. To the barn, through the stable.
Well,
so
let's say that one family member went out to the barn, and then they said that they were going to come back.
They didn't. So
I would go looking for you.
So it was in the order of, I think, Andres, his wife, and then Victoria, and then the youngest daughter, like one by one.
Really sad.
I know, the 7-year-old. I have a 7-year-old, so it's like, I can't.
No,
but
just picture that poor baby inside the house, wondering where the rest of them were at. That makes me really sad.
Yeah. So Maria, she was found lying in front of her bed, covered with a blanket, and then the bodies in the barn were found covered with a door panel and hay. We aren't fully sure as to what happened to the family, as we have no indication of the actual sequence of events because there weren't any witnesses. However, investigators were able to piece together a potential scenario, and this is what is listed here. So, they believe the murderer lured each family one by one and used a mattock to kill them. The younger
What
Kazilia,
is a mattock?
it's a little hand axe, because you'll see later on, one of the possible suspects, he actually made the handle of it, so he would have known where it was.
Yeah.
And they didn't find it at the time, they found it later. But they all went out one by one. And the younger Kazilia, that's the one, and it sucks because she was 7 years old, but she had the worst of it. She showed signs of hair pulling, strangulation, and severe blunt force trauma to her head. And after they did her autopsy, she was alive for hours after the attack, and she tore out clumps of her hair in agony because of it. Like, you're just lying there dying, everybody else is dead, and then she was 7, you know what I mean? Then the murderer left the barn and went into the house where he killed the 2-year-old in his cot in the bedroom. And then the maid, hearing that, they think she walked over to see what was happening, and she was found murdered in her room, like in the room, lying face down. So the extra weird thing about this case, because the entire case is very suspicious, is that there were 4 days between the murder actually happening and the discovery of the bodies. So on April, and we know this because people were showing up to the farm.
Yeah.
So on April 1st, coffee sellers went to the farm. However, no one was home, and so they left. But they did see the door to the machine room was propped open. Then Kazilia's school noticed her absence, that's the younger Kazilia, and then the church noticed that the family didn't show up on Sunday. So on April 4th, a mechanic named Albert Hoffner, he went to the farm to work on an engine, but no one came out to meet him. So he just did the repairs and he left after about 4.5 hours.
Did the repairs on a vehicle?
An engine, yeah. I'm assuming it must have been out in the farmyard or something.
I feel like, and I could be wrong, obviously, I don't think that guy has anything to do with it, but how soon? Well, this is April, so it's still cold. So they might have not been like starting to
decompose.
Yeah.
That much, yeah. So later that day on April 4th, after no sightings of the family by anyone, Schlittenbauer, so that's the guy who was like with Victoria and might be Joseph's son. Yeah. He was like, okay, he sent his son and his stepson out to the farm to see if they could find anyone. But when they went, they didn't, I don't think they looked that hard, or they said the house was locked and they couldn't get in. So they were like, we didn't see anyone. So then he himself, with 2 neighbors, Michael Pohl and Jacob Sigel, they went in. And that's when they went to the barn and found the bodies of the family. Now, once the bodies were discovered, a team from Munich, which was led by Inspector George Reingruber, they were assigned to solve the murder case. However, by the time the team got there, the entire scene was contaminated. The bodies were moved, evidence was moved, the house was used to cook meals. Yeah, so they didn't just not touch anything, they touched everything they possibly could.
Why would you cook meals?
I mean, I guess they were there and they were hungry? I don't know. And so on April 5th, the autopsies, which were performed in the barn, they established that a weapon like a mattock was used to kill everyone. However, initially they did not find that. The first motive was thought to be robbery, though. But all of the money in the farmhouse was in the farmhouse, and it wasn't touched. The weird thing, though, is upon further investigation, they realized that whoever had killed the family had stayed on the farm for a few days because they had fed the cattle. They'd eaten food from the kitchens. They'd moved things around.
But people had showed up.
Yeah. Interestingly, a year later, when the farm was destroyed because of the gruesome events, and when the barn was being torn down, the workers found a blood-stained mattock and under the floorboards, and that is what was used to murder the family. They didn't find it for a year.
So the murderer hung around the property for a few days. You said people showed up and like knocked on the door or whatever.
Yeah.
But the door was, you said the door was
The door to
locked?
the machine room was open.
So that person was still there,
Yeah.
just hanging out.
Yep.
And then was like, I'm going to put the murder weapon under the floorboard of the property.
Yep. And then left, I guess, eventually.
Yeah, and then eventually dipped out.
So who would do something like this? There are 2 weird things that stood out. On April 1st, on the night of the murders, there was another farmer passing by when he saw 2 figures standing near the forest edge. He couldn't see their faces, but when he went closer, one of them walked up and blinded him with a lantern. But he did notice that they were burning something with a strange smell coming from the oven because he could see the smoke billowing up from the farmhouse. And, like, he was going to go investigate, but, like, one of them blocked his path and, like, he just
he was
didn't bother with it.
I'm sure he probably got bad vibes and was like, Gonna dip.
And then in 1927, a mysterious man stopped someone at midnight in one of the parks and was like, hey, do you know about this murder? And they were like, yeah, everyone does. And then he was like, he did it. And then he just ran away and they never found him. So it
I
must
don't
have
think
been.
that he did it. I think he was probably trolling them.
Yeah. So the first potential suspect that was looked at was Carl Gabriel, the dead husband of Victoria, because some people had the theory that he didn't actually die in battle in World War One. And that was because some former prisoners of war said that they were released by a German speaking Soviet officer who said that he was the murderer. So everyone was like, the only German speaking possible Soviet officer would be him.
Yeah.
But they changed their story a ton of times, and that was incredible. And then the two soldiers that served with him from the same town said they were able to identify his body.
Yeah.
So that's not true.
I don't think that one's the case.
Then, Lawrence Schlittenbauer, the man who had a relationship with Victoria and who found the bodies, is another suspect. He was the one that found the bodies, and he was the one that said the doors to the house were all locked, and that's why they couldn't get in to find the family. But then, as soon as he came back and he went into the barn, all of a sudden he was able to get into the house. That doesn't
make sense.
It doesn't add up. And then with the keys missing, if he was able to get into the house, did Victoria give him the keys to get into the house, or?
And if they were having an affair, he'd probably be familiar with the.
Well, it didn't work out. Remember, that's why child support was a whole battle.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe they were still friendly. But yeah, he was also one of the people that compromised the crime scene, which hindered the investigation.
But I mean, even I know it didn't work out, but even if he would be familiar with the property.
If it was his son, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. But further reason for him being a suspect was that he allegedly said things like the ground was frozen. That's why the bodies weren't buried. But he was a neighbor and also a farmer. So maybe he knew the ground was frozen and that's why the murderer couldn't. Because it makes sense if you're a farmer. You're like, oh, the ground was frozen.
I could see myself doing something dumb, like making assumptions like that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think that's incriminating enough. And it's important to note that he did win a case for slander against people who called him the murderer of Hinterkaifeck right before he died, I think in 1941, but I don't remember the exact date. Yeah. So next suspects are the Gump brothers. So Adolf Gump was identified as a suspect very early on because he was part of the far-right group called the Freikorps Oberland, and he may have participated in the murder of multiple farmers. It's something like 9 farmers. In addition, Adolf's sister claimed on her deathbed in 1951 that her brothers had committed the murders. Adolf had died years earlier, so they couldn't do anything there, but Anton was taken in.
Yeah.
But he ended up being released because they couldn't prove any involvement, even with, the murder of all the farmers beforehand. So next up we have in 1971, a woman came forward saying that when she was 12 years old, her mother got a visit from another woman who claimed that her sons Carl S. and Andreas S. had committed the murders. She said that her son Andreas had lost a penknife when he did the gruesome act. However, the only reason, because it was so far-fetched, the only reason they paid any mind to it was that they did find a penknife at the farm when they were tearing things down. And they weren't sure.
What is a penknife? What is that used for?
It's just like a penknife is like a little flip knife, I'm pretty sure.
Like a pocket knife?
Yeah.
Okay.
But they weren't sure if it belonged to the family or not.
Knives.
Exactly. And then the former maid said, no, she definitely saw that knife when she worked there. So, obviously, it was a really small lead to go off of in the first place. So then we have the Bickler brothers. And they were named by the original maid of the family. She said that Anton, the brother, had worked at the farm and on multiple occasions had said that the family should be dead. She said that the family dog also barked at almost all visitors, but never ever barked at Anton. She suspected that the Bickler brothers committed the murders along with George Siegel, a farmhand that knew of the family fortune. Siegel was also the one that carved the handle of the mattock while he worked at Hinterkaifeck, and so he would know where to find it in the barn. But still.
What's the motive?
Exactly. Now, even with multiple potential suspects coming up over the years, nothing has ever come of it. There's a thread on Reddit that I think I will link in the description that claims that according to a forensic project, they solved the case, but the name of the killer will not be revealed due to privacy reasons. Because all these years later, it would affect real life people. And it's just one of those things where we will never know, because if they've solved the case, but they won't release it.
Maybe it'll get released eventually.
Maybe eventually.
our
But it's
lifetime.
Germany. It's Germany, so the bureaucracy is. I highly doubt it will, because there's also a lot of privacy laws. I don't think it will ever be released. But it's one of those cases where it's so gruesome, it's so sad. It impacted an entire community and an entire family.
Yeah.
And the people who they claimed committed the murder. And then they don't release anything.
Who do you think committed the murder?
If I were to say, I think it might have been a farmhand in passing, genuinely, because I don't think it would be someone who knew the family that closely. Because at a certain point, can you murder people like that you know?
If you're a psychopath, yeah, because you don't have any emotions.
I mean, yeah, but
People
still.
murder their mothers and all the time.
I feel like for someone, because if it was someone that they knew, like let's say it was the guy that everyone called the murderer of Hinterkaifeck, if it was him, why would he stay there? Why would he be lurking in their attic? He was a neighbor. He could just show up anytime.
I don't know.
Like, it doesn't make any sense for him to do
That's
it.
true.
It would have to be a
But
farmhand in passing.
He might get like a rush out of being in the attic.
I don't know. I just don't think that's like incriminating enough. I genuinely think it has to be someone in, because someone who's lurking, stalking, and continuously like
that brutal.
haunting?
I almost feel like you'd have to have a motive. Maybe I don't
think
know.
The most likely scenario is definitely a farmhand that just didn't like them, knew they were rich, and kind of
the theory of the child that might be the
Schittenbaus.
Yes, that guy. You don't think that theory has much ground?
Because how much would child support payments even be in the
I don't know
1800s? And if he owned a farm, I don't think he was that strapped for cash.
You don't think he would have been that about child support?
Especially since he had another son and stepson. I don't think that man really would kill an entire family over, especially if they were rich. Like, okay.
Was he married?
He had a former marriage that didn't work out. Then he tried to get with Victoria. That didn't work out.
Okay, so it's not like he was having an affair on somebody.
Yeah.
Because men have killed their wives for less.
Yeah.
So maybe you could kill your mistress if it would affect your home life. But if he wasn't married, then I don't know.
No, there's like no reason. That's the thing. People call him the murderer for years, and it's just...
No.
It has to be someone in passing. They saw an opportunity, they took it. And the reason why they wouldn't take the money, there had to be something there.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just didn't do it for money. They did it for the thrill.
I'm kind of going with they did it for the thrill because they hung out for multiple days afterwards. So I feel like they were getting something out of hanging out around the dead bodies.
But yeah, that is the story of the Hinterkaifeck murders. If you guys want us to cover anything else, let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. And we would record a Patreon exclusive for this right now, but we can't because there's a massive storm happening behind us.
We can do a Patreon exclusive later.
Yeah. Bye,
Next episode, maybe. I don't know. It depends on what's happening outside.
Bye.
Bye.